Hey guys, we are here to read chapter 8 of Things Fall Apart. Make sure you're following along on your PDF or in your book, and that you're also marking any quotes that you can use as evidence for your essay. Chapter 8. Okonkwo didn't taste any food for 2 days after the death of Ikemefuna. He drank palm wine from morning till night, and his eyes were red and fierce, like the eyes of a rat when it was caught by the tail and dashed against the floor. He called his son Nuwoye to sit with him in his obi, but the boy was afraid of him and slipped out of the hut as soon as he noticed him dozing. He did not sleep at night. He tried not to think about Ikemefuna, but the more he tried, the more he thought about him. Once he got up from bed and walked about his compound, but he was so weak that his legs could hardly carry him. He felt like a drunken giant walking with the limbs of a mosquito. Now and then a cold shiver descended on his head and spread down his body. So the beginning of chapter 8 is a lot of indirect characterization again of Okonkwo, and the author keeps doing this throughout the book because that's giving him complexity for us, the reader. That's making him seem like he is a genuine, complex human. And I think that this is important because, again, like one of Chinua Achebe's ultimate goals, I think, with this book is to help break some of our two-dimensional stereotypes of Africa and African people. They are human, just like us, and so they're also complex, just like us. We can infer in the beginning of chapter 8 that Okonkwo is experiencing some severe depression, probably severe remorse for what he did to Ikemefuna. On the third day, again, we have this like repetition of the number 3, which we mentioned before is a very biblical connotation to it, that number. On the third day, he asked his second wife, Akwefi, to roast plantains for him. Plantains are kind of like bananas-ish. She prepared it the way he liked, with slices of oil bean and fish. "You have not eaten for 2 days," said his daughter Azima when she brought the food to him, "so you must finish this." She sat down and stretched her legs in front of her. Okonkwo ate the food absent-mindedly. She should have been a boy, he thought, as he looked at his 10-year-old daughter. He passed her a piece of fish. "Go and bring me some cold water," he said. Azima rushed out of the hut, chewing the fish, and soon returned with a bowl of cool water from the earthen pot in her mother's hut. Okonkwo took the bowl from her and gulped the water down. He ate a few more pieces of plantain and pushed the dish aside. So water, if you're looking at symbols, water is always associated with cleanliness, purity, and baptism. So that has a Christian connotation as well. We talked previously about the fact that Okonkwo is almost always associated with fire and dry things. And that, of course, is kind of a connection to how he is as a character. He's just very explosive and very angry. He's very fiery. So after he commits the ultimate act of fire and anger, which was killing Ikemefuna at the end of the last chapter, isn't it interesting that the author has this little part at the beginning of chapter 8 where he asks his daughter to bring him water, and he ingests it, he gulps it down. So that is kind of symbolic for his desire to kind of cleanse himself from the sin, ultimately, even though he's not Christian, but to cleanse himself from the evil that he feels that he did. The description, by the way, of the water is very pleasant. It's very positive. So it makes it sound like the author is portraying this as kind of a good thing for him to be doing. "Bring me my bag," he asked, and Azima brought his goatskin bag from the far end of the hut. He searched in it for his snuff bottle. It was a deep bag and took almost the whole length of his arm. It contained other things apart from his snuff bottle. There was a drinking horn in it, and also a drinking gourd, and they knocked against each other as he searched. When he brought out the snuff bottle, he tapped it a few times against his kneecap before taking out some snuff on the palm of his left hand. Then he remembered that he had not taken out his snuff spoon. He searched his bag again and brought out a small flat ivory spoon with which he carried the brown snuff to his nostrils. Azima took the dish in one hand and the empty water bowl in the other and went back to her mother's hut. She should have been a boy, Okonkwo said to himself again. If only he could find some work to do, he would be able to forget. That's a really interesting part. I just want to pause and mention that because the author is using repetition here. He's mentioned twice now that he wishes that his daughter Azima was a boy. We know from previous chapters and the experiences between these two characters that Azima is probably his favorite child. Like, they really get along, and you can tell that he really loves her and appreciates her. Now, there's kind of two ways to interpret this thinking that he wishes that she was a boy. The first way to interpret it is that he feels that she is kind of masculine, probably more so than Nwoye. She just seems like a really strong person. And I think that that interpretation is one where he's wishing that Nwoye had more of the traits that Azima has, that she would essentially make a better boy than his son Nwoye does. But I think the second way that you could interpret this is that he's longing to have more of a connection with his boys, particularly with Nwoye, the kind of connection that he can have with Azima. So again, it's adding complexity to who he is as a character. Azima took the dish in his... oh, sorry, I'm repeating. I'm about midway through that paragraph. His mind went back to Ikamifuna and he shivered. If only he could find some work to do, he would be able to forget. But it was the season of rest between the harvest and the next planting season, and the only work that men did at this time was covering the walls of their compound with new palm fronds. And Okonkwo had already done that. He'd finished it on the very day the locusts came, when he had worked on one side of the wall and Ikamifuna and Nwoye on the other. When did you become a shivering old woman? Okonkwo asked himself. You, who are known in all the 9 villages for your valor and war. How can a man who has killed 5 men in battle fall to pieces because he has added a boy to their number? Okonkwo, you've become a woman indeed. You can feel like his frustration with himself here. So a lot of inner turmoil, inner conflict that he's experiencing. He sprang to his feet, hung his goatskin bag on his shoulder, and went to visit his friend, Obierica. Obierica was sitting outside under the shade of an orange tree, making thatches from leaves of the raffia palm. He exchanged greetings with Okonkwo and led the way into his obi. I was coming to see you as soon as I finished that thatch, she said, rubbing off the grains of sand that clung to his thighs. Is it well? Okonkwo asked. Yes, replied Obierica. My daughter's suitor is coming today, and I hope it will clinch the matter of the bride price. I want you to be there. Just then, Obierica's son, Maduka, came into the obi from outside, greeted Okonkwo, and turned towards the compound. Come and shake hands with me, Okonkwo said to the lad. Your wrestling the other day gave me much happiness. The boy smiled, shook hands with Okonkwo, and went into the compound. He will do great things, Okonkwo said. If I had a son like him, I should be happy. I'm worried about Nwoye. A bowl of pounded yams can throw him in a wrestling match. His 2 younger brothers are more promising. But I tell you, Obierica, that my children, they don't resemble me. Where are the young suckers that will grow when the old banana tree dies? If Azima had been a boy, I would have been much happier. She has the right spirit. You worry yourself for nothing, said Obierica. The children are still very young. Nwoye is old enough to impregnate a woman. At his age, I was already fending for myself. No, my friend, he is not too young. A chick that will grow into a cock can be spotted the very day it hatches. I've done my best to make Nwoye grow into a man, but there is too much of his mother in him. Too much of his grandfather, Obierica thought, but he did not say it. So, of course, they're referring back to Unoka there. The same thought also came to Okonkwo's mind, but he had long learned how to lay that ghost. Whenever the thought of his father's weakness and failure troubled him, he expelled it by thinking about his own strength and success. And so he did now. His mind went to his latest show of manliness. I cannot understand why you refused to come with us to kill that boy, he asked Obierica. Because I didn't want to, Obierica replied sharply. I had something better to do. You sound as if you question the authority and the decision of the oracle, who said he should die. I do not. Why should I? But the oracle did not ask me to carry out its decision. But someone had to do it. If we were all afraid of blood, it would not be done. And what do you think the oracle would do then? You know very well, Okonkwo, that I am not afraid of blood. And if anyone tells you that I am, he is telling a lie. And let me tell you one thing, my friend. If I were you, I would have stayed home. What you have done will not please the earth. It's the kind of action for which the goddess wipes out whole families. That line right there, that is foreshadowing. It suggests that doom is perhaps coming to Okonkwo and his family. I think what Okonkwo is trying to do here in his meeting with Obierica is I think he is trying to get support for his decision. I think what he is seeking is he's wanting Obierica, his friend, to tell him you did the right thing, to reassure him, to remind him that the oracle declared that Ikamifuna should die. Okonkwo is getting upset and he's getting feisty because that's not what Obierica is giving him. Obierica is telling him the opposite. Yes, the oracle did state that Ikamifuna should die, but the oracle didn't tell us specifically that we needed to be the ones who killed him. And I think he's going to go into that a little bit more here. The earth cannot punish me for obeying her messenger, Okonkwo said. A child's fingers are not scalded by a piece of hot yam which its mother puts into its palm. That's true, Obierica agreed. But if the oracle said that my son should be killed, I would neither dispute it nor be the one to do it. I think a lot of us are probably would be quick to criticize what's happening in this culture here. We often think that it's savage that any father or parent figure or guardian would be willing to kill their own child, no matter who tells them to do it. But this also reminds me of a very well-known Bible story, and I think it was between Isaac and Abraham, where Abraham, in the story, Abraham wanted a child very, very badly. He and his wife waited for children, and God promised him for many years that he would give him children, that he would increase his family size exponentially. But Abraham kept getting older, and so he started to lose kind of faith in what God was saying. But God eventually did follow through and give Abraham a son, whom he named Isaac. And then, for those of you who are familiar, eventually God challenged him. He tested Abraham by telling him, I need you to sacrifice your son. Those of you who are familiar with the Bible story, was Abraham willing to sacrifice his son? The answer is yes, he was willing to do it. Now, he didn't actually do it, and you can Google the story between Abraham and Isaac if you want to get more details on that Bible story, but he was willing to do it. So I don't know, I think it's fascinating that this culture that a lot of us often perceive as being savage or less than our Western culture shares these parallels to the root of our Western culture, to Christianity and things like that. So I think all of the details in here kind of help to emphasize the author's point that we're all human and we're really not that different from each other. They would have gone on arguing had Ofuedo not come in just then. It was clear from his twinkling eyes that he had important news. But it would be impolite to rush him. Obierica offered him a lobe of the kola nut he had broken with Okonkwo. Ofuedo ate slowly and talked about the locusts. When he finished his kola nut, he said, "The things that happen these days are very strange." "What has happened?" asked Okonkwo. "Do you know Agbuefi Ndulu?" Ofuedo asked. Agbuefi Ndulu of Ire Village, Okonkwo and Obierica said together. "Well, he died this morning," said Ofuedo. "Well, that's not strange. He was the oldest man in Ire," said Obierica. "You're right," Ofuedo agreed. "But you ought to ask why the drum has not beaten to tell Umuofia of his death." "Why?" asked Obierica and Okonkwo together. "Well, that's the strange part of it. You know his first wife who walks with a stick?" "Yeah, she's called Ozamina." "That is so," said Ofuedo. Ozamina was, as you know, too old to attend Ndulu during his illness. His younger wives did that. When he died this morning, one of these women went to Ozamina's hut and told her. She rose from her mat, took her stick, and walked over to the Obi. She knelt on her knees and hands at the threshold and called her husband, who was laid on a mat. Ugbuafi Nidulu, she called 3 times, and went back to her hut. When the youngest wife went to call her again to be present at the washing of the body, she found her lying on the mat, dead. Well, that's very strange indeed, said Okonkwo. They will put off Nduelu's funeral until his wife has been buried. That's why the drum has not beaten to tell Umuofia. It was always said that Ndulu and Azamino had one mind, said Obiarka. I remember when I was a young boy there was a song about them. He could not do anything without telling her. I did not know that, said Okonkwo. I thought he was a strong man in his youth. He was indeed, said Efwedu. Okonkwo shook his head doubtfully. He led Umuofia to war in those days, said Obiarka. So I'm actually going to turn this chapter into 2 parts, so I'm going to cut the video in just a moment. But my question that I want you to think about here is, what do you think the purpose is of this news that the author incorporates in this chapter? Like, what role does it play? It kind of seems random, so it has to be in there for a reason. So I want you to think about that, and then we will pick up with the second half of chapter 8 shortly. Thanks.